Okay, so just to remind everybody that we will be opening it up for questions and comments um, during the chat, which will once we turn off the recording. But today it's January 25th, 2024, and I'm here with Dr. Minjung Ryu, who is associate uh, professor here at the chemistry department and also at the LSRI Research Institute. And Dr. Ryu is currently the director of undergraduate chemistry instruction in the chemistry department. Congratulations for that honor. Do you want to tell us just real quickly what those responsibilities are?
Yeah, I mean essentially, coordinating the entire undergraduate program in my department. And I'm also still learning about a lot of different responsibilities that this, position takes. But I receive a lot of emails from students directly or, emails that are forwarded to me that are about like how to like essentially like course taking. I have not taken this course and I have taken this course, but I have not met, the required grades to move forward, and what do I do? And I also receive a lot of emails from transfer students, how to transfer their credits. And I receive a lot of emails about opportunities for our undergrad students. So I share those things with our undergrad students as well. So those are the most things that are most relevant, I think, to students. So I'm here to help everybody. So if you have any question, you're, more than welcome to reach out to me.
Great, but we've been doing this forum with you even before you got tenure and before you got these things. So as long as you continue to do these forums with me, then you're going to get all these NSF grants and responsibilities, I guess. So we'll see what happens next. So what's the thing you most want your students to know? Any students that might listen to this recording later or attend this event?
About what?
About like takeaways from what to know about their
Oh,
STEM.
about this. Yeah, I think one of the things is that um, college professors are also human beings and they're not, scary monsters. So most of them are uh willing to help students. So if you have any questions, if you have any challenges and concerns, reach out to them and talk with them. And they are, a lot of them are friendly. And I know, the fear and like, because everything is new, in college, classroom is small, you get to see your teacher every day pretty much, but it's different in college. You're sitting in, I don't know, 200 students in lecture hall and you see the professor, 3 hours a week, which is like really short period of time, I think. And so you feel like they are far away from you and, you may feel scared, but we are, and they are all human beings and they are really, happy to help you. So please reach out to them. So that would be the most important message that I would like you to get away from today's session.
Yeah, and I think as somebody who taught not in STEM but taught in the humanities for a couple of decades as well, I think sometimes professors and instructors really like to get any kind of feedback, and I think students. It doesn't have to be, just positive feedback. It could be feedback on anything that's going on because sometimes, especially in my courses where it was sometimes it could be lecture heavy, it's really useful to find out like what's being actually received and so we're going to go through a couple of questions today to kind of walk a first generation student or maybe even a highly motivated student, particularly any kind of student post COVID, through some of the kind of realities of working with your professor, and particularly STEM professors, and we're sensitive to that because STEM professors tend to teach large lecture format courses, and those can be the most alienating courses. I tend not to have students, ask me how do I engage with my theater professor or my English professor because they tend to have, small classes, so they're a little bit easier. Um, so Minjung, what are some of the most common mistakes that students make in their STEM classes?
In general,
Yeah.
um, I think they may think college, for instance, chemistry is similar to high school chemistry, in the sense that in many high school classrooms, teachers are gonna, take time to go over stuff over and over again, I think, and scheduled, even though they, high schools have curriculum, it's more flexible. But in college, it's, 3 hour lecture a week, and you're gonna have 1 hour with your TA most of the times, and you need to spend a lot of time outside of those, class time. And I think a lot of times students make the mistake that, okay, I'm going to the class, I'm going to learn in the classroom. In fact, you actually, it requires a lot of, self-study, and perhaps going to, any finding any resources on campus, and going to tutoring centers and seeing your TAs and stuff. So I think calculating those time in, and scheduling your life around that is, I think, really important. And first year students especially may make the mistake that, I have, in a way, if you look at only your course schedule, it's not a lot compared to, your high school time, where you have to be in school from 8 to 3-ish. But it's not just that. You need to spend a lot of time outside of the class. And perhaps that's one of the mistakes students tend to make early on in their college career. And, and
Given given that that given that that was your answer, I'm gonna move to question number 6 that I gave you ahead of time. Um, but are there proven strategies for doing better in STEM coursework?
yeah, that's really good question, but also hard to answer. A lot of times what I see is I think it's also related to the fact that we use computer a lot, and homeworks are done through computers and stuff. And students tend to just literally look at their monitor and read it through, and then they feel like they understand what is going on, and they can solve the problems without actually solving the problem on paper. Um, so I think it is important for students to actually engage in the problem solving. And you may think that just like by looking at it, you can do it, but actually like using pen and pencil, like engaging your entire, body and hand muscle and everything, it actually is related to your learning and cognition. So I would say one most important thing is actually, engage in the problem solving, um, using, the tools that you need to use, paper and pencil. And that's how actually, in an exam situation, that's how you are getting tested. And you should be able to, solve everything, write out everything and solve the problems on your own. And doing the practices over and over again would be very helpful. And another thing is, you know, putting together the structure of the concepts you're learning in a way that makes sense to you. So you might have heard something like concept map, or, graphic organization and stuff like that. And it is important for the learner to develop those things on their own, so that you can students can put together in a way that makes sense to them. So when you study, you should be able to see the bigger picture of the content that you're learning. So once you develop that, as you learn more, you can revise it, or you can go back to it and, revisit it over and over again. Um, so I would say those two are probably the most important strategy skill. I mean, learning strategies.
What do you do for a student who is struggling with the either the concepts or like the memorization of formulas, math formulas, and so forth? Are there any particular pedagogical strategies or resources that you think of when a student approaches you with those concerns?
Um, what I do if my students come to my office hour and ask questions about certain concept or problem solving, I I ask I would give them the problem or the I don't know, engage them to do something, and then I would ask questions and I try to have them figure things out while they are, like actively working on the problem or while they're talking about the problem. So and I have seen students like having some aha moment, while doing that. So that is my way of in inviting students to like that active cognitive work. And if a student can do it on their own or as they study together with friends, I think that can be very beneficial. Um, in terms of memorization, I um, I am actually not sure, and we are kind of I don't know, moving away from thinking that memorizing facts is learning. So in our, as when we design exams, um, we provide like formulas and stuff, and not everything, but of course there are some things that you need to memorize, but I think I don't know, compared to what I learned 30 years ago, we had to memorize a lot, but nowadays professors tend to think that that's not necessarily learning. um so I don't have any answer to that particularly. But I think part of it is as you practice more and more, some of the things would just, stick with you. And and we are moving kind of away from, asking students to memorize a lot of things.
What do you think is, and I'm going off our script a little bit, what do you think is going on when a student comes to you after an exam and says, that wasn't what was in the lecture, or that wasn't, we weren't prepared for that particular aspect on the exam. What do you think is not only as someone who's probably had that happen to you, I imagine, just as being a professor, but also as somebody who actually researches that kind of work. What's going on there?
That's really, tricky situation. Um, I think professors and students have probably different perspectives on what that meant. It might have been just, simply miscommunication. I don't know. But from my own experience and also, what my, some of the things that I've learned about how students learn and how education has been done in the past decade or so, we somehow, I think unintentionally, have trained students to study for the test. And students are in general, I'm not talking about one particular students, but students are in general very used to the practices where teacher would tell you these are going to be on the exam, and they studied those things very specifically. And when, you know, when I say, I don't know, when I say this is going to be on the exam, um, when professors say this is going to be on the exam, they may think that, related questions can be on the exam, but students may think very, interpret that very narrowly. I think that's something that could happen. Um, and I think based on their experiences in our education system. And I personally think that is not good for, our students' development and everybody's, learning and our, everything. So I don't know. I hope that students develop you know the skills and capacity to, again, to see the big picture, in the concept and the content and how they're related, and um so that, students don't just study for the test, if that makes sense.
I'm going to circle back to some of this with resources both here at UIC and online for STEM learners here at UIC. We'll kind of cover that a little bit towards the end. I'm going to go back to kind of different topic here, Minjung, because another part of college is not just, uh, you know, learning the material in the courses, but also the opportunity to develop a connection with your professor, right? So, and inversely with your student. So, what's the best way to develop a strong relationship with the professor towards the goal of having, a letter of recommendation, perhaps, or mentoring or research opportunities?
um I mean, this might be a very obvious response, but you need to do well in in the course. And I think sometimes I received emails from like, I don't know, 2, 3 years back, and they're like, I am applying for grad school or something. Can I write a letter for me? And I'm like, I don't remember you, So that is, I want to help them. And I personally, most of the cases, I try to write a letter for them. But if the professor doesn't know you, it can be tricky. So you want to, I mean, number one, you want to do well, not just in the lecture where you see the professor, but also, in labs or discussion sessions where you mostly interact with the TAs. And what I and also some other people do is they reach out to TAs and see their input, have their input in writing the letters. So in any, circumstances, just, like do well, and then kind of especially I think in a smaller classroom setting, or such as in like the labs or discussions, it's easier for you to make some good impressions to your instructors. So I would do that. And if especially developing relationship with your professors, you can go to their office hours and ask questions if you have any. You may think that, oh, I know everything. I'm like, the material is so easy, so I don't need to go see the professor. But I am pretty sure there are some things that you can ask about the content, like, even going deeper about a particular topic, or, your talking about your career path or research opportunities, and um having some conversation like that. If there is any opportunity that you can have the face-to-face time with your professor, I think you want to take that up and have some conversation with them, so later, the professor would remember you.
Yeah, and when we get into that question of office hours, now that we are in whatever this is, late COVID or post COVID kind of era, right? 2024. Um, and certainly with the profile of many of our students who are working and it's difficult for them to make a given office hour that a professor might have and things like that. What is the student? What would the student do who maybe has difficulty making your physical office hours, or even I don't know if UIC student professors are doing Zoom office hours de rigueur or if it's just person by person.
Yeah, I think, I mean, a lot of people that I know, my colleagues are very flexible in, accommodating students' schedule. So, if you cannot, make it to their office hour, just email them, ask. Asking is not gonna hurt anybody, and you can explain your situation. Then I am sure a lot of people would find a way to support you.
Right. And we've also had students who are UIC is somewhat famous for undergraduate research. And so I'm putting in the chat the URE website, which can help students find research topics. But some students may be confused by the very success of a resource like this URE resource, and thinking that only professors on that list are ones they can work with as an undergraduate. But in fact, all professors at UIC do research. So any professor can connect them with that. And so I'm kind of I'm using you, Minjung, to kind of pivot to this resource, right? But but have you worked with any undergraduates in a research capacity, and what kind of um, I think sometimes students feel like they get imposter syndrome even at the undergraduate level, right? They feel like, oh, I'm not good enough or whatever. Can you tell me like what you're kind of minimally looking for in an undergraduate to help you with your research?
Um, I think, in terms of, I don't know, in terms of like how, like the skill that they have, I personally don't have a high expectation, but what I am looking for is how reliable the student is and how much time that they can commit to. So if their schedule is, like full, and if they can commit only like 2 to 3 hours, it's just for, per week. It's just, you're gonna spend the whole time for training them only, right? And it's gonna be, I mean, the relationship should be mutually beneficial, if that makes sense. So, somebody who is reliable, who would show up and, if I give them a task, reasonable task, and if they can complete it and, within a reasonable time frame, and somebody who can commit, I would say minimum like 6 hours per week, and who has, good communication skills. Not, this doesn't mean that you have to be like, you know, I don't know, like a reporter or something, but who would respond to your emails, and, um, who can communicate their ideas and their thoughts, and who are, willing to be challenged, and willing to be explored, different options and different opportunities. Those are the characteristics that I am looking for.
Yeah.
Uh,
And when you write a letter of recommendation for an undergraduate, what are like the easiest letters for you to write? You mentioned that some of them are kind of hard to write because the student has been away from the class for a couple semesters, but like what kinds of student behaviors jump to your mind when I say like, oh, the easiest student you've ever had to write a recommendation for?
yeah, students who, I mean, of course, number one is the grade that they received. And then I would also look at their other kinds of, participation. So like I have a record of their assignment submission and their attendance to the discussions and all those little things. They may not count a lot for their final grade, but that tells me how reliable they are, how how much they take their responsibilities seriously. So I would look at those things. And sometimes and I also think I want to say, yes, grades are important, but sometimes there are students who were struggling early in the semester, but they like somehow make good improvement throughout the semester. And those are also good characteristics that I want to highlight in the letter. And like I said, I typically I reach out to TA graduate students who taught the student and they typically remember like, oh, that student always came to the class on time. They actively engaged in class activities and labs and participate in discussion. And those things are what I don't get to see a lot in my lecture setting, but I could hear from the TA's perspectives. What else? And if students come to my office hours, often I also remember some of the conversation that I had with them. So those are also helpful.
I uh, um, I used to be a pre-health advisor, and I know that medical schools won't take letters of recommendation from TAs, and yet what people don't realize is they will accept what are called team letters or letters between the TA and the professor, or the professors might, like you, incorporate the TA's kind of input or co-writing into the letter. Do you want to talk about like how an undergraduate might approach a TA and or a professor about doing such a team letter, or how that process might play out?
In my case, I don't think I've never received a request from a student. But when a student asked me to write a letter for them, I asked them like, who are your TAs in this particular semester? So I think that's the important thing. Like you need to remember who are your discussion TAs, your lab TAs. Um, and then I asked them who their TAs were, and then I would reach out to them. Um, and if they had particularly good relationship with not personal relationship, but if a student feel like they can get a good letter from their particular specific TA, and it's related to that, course. So for instance, I teach Gen Chem, and then if your TA that you're thinking of is from Orgo, I'm not going to reach out to them. You know what I mean? So that it has to be aligned with the professor and the TA that you're thinking of. So if you want to receive a letter from your Gen Chem professor and stood out to your Gen Chem TA, you can drop the name in the email to the professor. So and so was my TA, and I would appreciate if you reach out to the TA and have their input or something like that. I think that wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, and again, in my previous role, I used to really encourage my students to tell the professor ahead of time, hey, I'm hoping to get a letter of recommendation maybe from you later, early in semester, just to kind of give the professor a little heads up on what that is. And I know some of your colleagues in chemistry, for example, have policies where they don't write letters of recommendation, which is their choice. But it's good for a student to know that early so that they can, um, work around that expectation.
Yeah.
Um, and then now I want to get into some of the fun stuff, right? The stuff you didn't really want me to ask you. What's the best way to, or how do we work with faculty most effectively when you need accommodations, or if a student is falling behind in the course, or they're having problems with the TA, or they have to miss class for certain reasons, or things like that? Do you have some advice? And I know in your new role, you've been working through some of these issues.
Um, I think if they need accommodation for, let's say, for a disability reasons or other, like for instance, like religious holidays and stuff like that, reach out to your professor like as soon as possible. Sometimes I receive an email like, hey, I'm, going somewhere because it's my holiday and that's next week. And I'm like, okay. So I think reach out to them early as possible is important. And if you have any, challenges and struggles, I think again also reach out to your professors, but I would say try to approach your professor from the perspective of resolving the problem like together as opposed to complaining and I want I don't know I don't know like something that they can do like if they want like new TA that's not gonna happen. Or yeah, like try to solve the problem together. And if you approach from that perspective, I think you and your professors can have conversation and resolve the problems together. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, because I mean, I also had kind of a multi-part question, in that sense. And then, we do have, certainly on the advising side, I have seen behavior that was improper, or on behalf of some of our faculty. What is a student to do if their faculty does something that they think is incorrect?
Faculty did something that is inappropriate
Or
or
just, what should they do?
um well, I mean, if there is if there is a, problem, there are ways to bring that up, to you know, to the higher level. But but I think I would first try to reach out to the professor and resolve it. And if that, you know, doesn't work out, there are some other, uh, infrastructure on campus that you can bring it up.
Let's say a student has a disagreement with the professor on something, a grade or whatever, is their next step then to reach to the chair of the department, or what's the next step for the student in that, as far as you think, most to be most productive?
I think if there is a if there is a like, error in the grades or, you know, I think mostly, error in the grades, you first reach out to the professor. If they don't respond, there typically is like for, in our department that probably would be me or there is a undergrad coordinator. You can reach out to those people to I mean, I kind of serve as a liaison in a case like that. But if there is you know, I have also seen cases where students feel like their grades are unfair. Um, and you know, if there is some, unequitable practices that have been done in the classroom, you would have to bring it up to a, larger, different, route. There's, dean of students, and you can, bring it up there. Um, yeah.
All right. So, last question was, what if a student sees other students cheating, using new AI tools to cheat, things like that? Um, I mean, I had a student bring that up to me and say, that could reset my curve and things like that. But in general, like, what are your thoughts on that? This kind of newer AI informed reality.
That is also very tricky. And professors are also struggling with those things, academic integrity. And we are, I mean, in a way, we're trying to address it proactively, but sometimes, it happens, and we would like to know and prevent it. So if I if a student observed, if student witnessed anything, I would like to know. So I think they can email the professor and describe what they observed, what they see, what they saw. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then like I said, I wanted to turn at the end towards resources. So, and since there's a number of us on there, you guys are also welcome to jump in with the chat with certain things that you recommend. But we sort of classically recommend things like Khan Academies, like chemistry and math sections as a free resource to students off campus. But on campus, of course, there's tutoring.uic.edu, which provides different modalities of tutoring. So, there's tutoring there's what they call Bascom Hall tutoring, which is honors students that tutor any student. It's not just for honors students, and, so that's why they keep changing their name to kind of iterate that. There's also AAAN's excellent student tutoring, which sometimes can be remote and on weekends and nights, which is really great. Um, and of course, there is tutoring not just in the subject area, but in STEM strength areas and study skills through ACE. And, my colleague Bahar is one I often tell people to go see. Um, and then, of course, Dr. Ortiz, the legendary chemistry guru in Lattes, who, um, Lattes has actually proven that he can raise your letter grade if you study with him every week, which is pretty amazing. And then of course MSLC, which is kind of more the instructors and the TAs kind of doing that. What else, Minjung? Are there other resources that we should highlight or remember in this case?
No, I think you named pretty much everything. I have seen more of our chemistry faculty providing their office hours in MSLC. So it's just like a huge group of, students studying together with, with the help of professor. And I think that's, excellent. And I would like more students to take advantage of those opportunities. That perhaps, if your professor offers that, going there and, having more a little less intimidating and kind of informal interaction with your professors can give them an opportunity to learn about you. So potentially it can contribute to receiving good letters recommendation from them as well.
Yeah, and generally like group, towards the end of my teaching profession years, I used to do office hours with groups of students, and I kind of assign them to come together, and that way they could kind of talk about issues that they saw as colleagues and kind of get into a more of a group mentality. But I think that we can encourage our students to do that, and of course, what you and I have decried is whenever a professor makes a study, a nighttime study event right before the exam, and then only like the most dedicated students show up, right? And then the students who are struggling the most are AWOL, and it can be so frustrating as a professor. Now those students might be working night jobs to support their family. They might have all sorts of very legitimate reasons for not being there, but I know that I want to give you a second to say something about that, about taking advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I have offered Saturday morning online like Zoom what did I call, like study session or something. I, just turned on Zoom and then we solved the problems together. And again, I mean, our professors are really, supportive of undergrad students learning. So if you if you have any requests that are reasonable, a lot of times they are going to find a way to support that. So just ask, and it's not gonna hurt. Um, especially if it's supporting your learning as opposed to I mean, to me, supporting learning and supporting grades are not necessarily the same thing. Um, so if you have requests to support your learning, reach out to them and talk to them, and they will be happy to help you.
Great. So I think that covers the recorded part of this conversation. So if you're fine with that, Minjung, I'll go ahead and end the recording, and then we will move on to any questions that our colleagues have, um, or students. And thank you so much for attending this event. And we're going to post this on the NASP YouTube website. So it'll be a resource that you can point your students to and your friends and colleagues to later on. And just a reminder, I have a very quick link to our survey if you wouldn't mind if you're there to kind of fill it out. It literally takes a few seconds.